And we are taking a stand here. We're operating in good faith. We're negotiating together for the best outcome for the people. And we do not desire a shutdown. I yield back to the gentleman.
A previous speaker just said that no Republican member wants a shutdown. I have the quotes right here, which I will submit for the record when I'm done.
After Republican Congressman Mike Johnson claimed that the GOP was not interested, was not trying to shut the government down, Democratic Representative Brendan Boyle shot back with a claim that basically, no, you guys are very much in favor of shutting down the government. I've got the receipts. Now, he's about to share those receipts with all of us. Let's take a look.
One House Republican said, let's shut it down. Another Republican colleague saying we shouldn't fear a government shutdown. Most Americans won't even miss it. And the leader of the Republican Party, the former president, saying, quote, unless you get everything, shut it down. Make no mistake about it. We are here because certain members on the other side of the aisle want a shutdown. They even said they want a shutdown. And why should we be surprised about that? Ever since I was in high school 30 years ago, we've had 5 government shutdowns. All 5 took place under House Republican leadership. When Democrats are in charge of the House, 0 government shutdowns during that same time period.
Congressman Boyle is right about that. And what's fascinating about this situation is, to be honest, I was under the impression that Republicans in the House would, essentially lead to a government shutdown, because typically when that happens, the blame is placed on the president. But in this case, if you look at the polling, it's abundantly clear that the majority of Americans would actually blame the Republican Party for causing the government shutdown. Now, unless Congress and the White House agree on spending legislation by midnight on September 30th, the government will in fact shut down. We're gonna talk about some of the ramifications of that in just a moment. But Boyle also took the opportunity to educate the public and the Republican Party about what exactly would happen when the government shuts down. Let's watch.
Now, in terms of the one Republican member who said that the American people won't miss it if there is a government shutdown, actually, here's what would happen. More than 7 million Americans would lose access to their benefits, women, infants, and children. 2.5 million active duty and reserve personnel serving in our nation's armed forces would go without the pay they deserve. 2.3 million federal workers could be furloughed or forced to work without pay. Millions of Americans who are going to our airports and going through TSA lines suddenly finding themselves with unending delay. There are, by the way, 1.6 million Americans who fly through our airports every single day who will be impacted. 660,000 college students who rely on federal work study. I was one of those students at one point who relied on that program. So make no mistake about it, there are real consequences to shutdowns.
There are real consequences to shutdowns. I'm gonna give you more details about that in just a moment. But Cenk, what are your thoughts on Representative Boyle's, willingness to fight back as Republicans are pretending that they're not the cause and they don't want a government shutdown?
So if you're new to politics, you might think that what you just saw there is perfectly normal. A Republican says something that's not true and a Democrat comes in and counters it. It's supposed to be a debate, 2 different parties, makes sense, right? Well, if you're not new to politics, you know that that was a shocking scene. So for the last 25 years I've been covering politics, and the Democrats have been doing unilateral surrender the entire time. They almost never counter Republican lies. And to do it on the floor of the House and to point out with their own quotes what they said wrong and point out that they're lying, wow. Isn't that so sad that it's like a shocking thing for our side to actually defend itself? God, Jesus, man, the Democratic Party has been a mess for so long. But thank you, Congressman, I appreciate it. Way to go, Brendan Boyle. Can we please get more? By the way, do you want to know why they're doing it? Because they have now, look, my job is to be honest with you. So I don't want to take a nice story and then give you some depressing angle to it, but I gotta be clear, right? So the reality is a lot of these guys have figured out oh, you can get grassroots fundraising if you give fiery speeches or just speeches where you defend your side on the floor of the Congress or in hearings. They saw Katie Porter raise a lot of money with her whiteboard, right? They've seen AOC and others raise a lot of money. On the other side, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz are printing campaign contributions. And to be fair to them, they're getting it from the grassroots, not from corporate donors, right? So as these guys are getting corporate cash, they're like, oh, well, we might get some good grassroots money too. But hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. Just fight for us for the first time in your lives. So what he said is indisputable. My whole life, Republican politicians have been universally liars. They almost always lie. And so them saying, oh, we don't want a government shutdown. It's absurd. We just saw you for the last how many weeks say over and over again, I don't care, we'll take a shutdown, we want the shutdown. And they don't, why do they not mind a government shutdown? That's why his second part of his speech was so important, because the Republican politicians don't care about the average person at all, at all. So they're like, oh, it would hurt the average American. Who cares? Why would I care about them? I'm here to serve the rich. And the rich like it when it's a government shutdown because we're going to bargain on their behalf to cut spending on the average American.
Right, and that is the sticking point, right? You have the House Freedom Caucus, which consists of the most conservative Republicans, demanding all sorts of nonsensical cuts to various federal government programs, which of course is not going to pass in the democratically controlled Senate. Joe Biden is less likely to sign that kind of legislation into law as a Democratic president. And so it's really a losing battle. And even Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is getting real salty over the House Republicans' handling of this entire situation. Now, with that said, I wanted to focus on one of the other very obvious consequences of failing to pass a government spending bill or funding bill, I should say, because FEMA is already taking action because they are anticipating a government shutdown. That means that during a government shutdown, they are not going to be able to get the funding they need in order to deal with disaster relief across the country. And this is all happening as we enter hurricane season. So the Federal Emergency Management Agency is essentially putting a hold on the resources they're offering to people who are trying to rebuild after their town or their state was impacted by a hurricane or a wildfire. The Biden administration has started to ration federal disaster aid, delaying the delivery of about $2.8 billion in grants. So the money is available in the event of a crisis, according to state and federal officials and budget documents obtained by the Washington Post. The last minute move has allowed the Federal Emergency Management Agency to shore up its rapidly dwindling budget against the immediate threat of wildfires, hurricanes, and other natural disasters as they arise, according to a senior agency official who spoke on the condition of anonymity. But it has also disrupted longer-term recovery projects in Florida, Puerto Rico, and other communities hit by past calamities. And so when you hear a little bit of panic in Senator Mitch McConnell's voice over how House Republicans are handling this issue, understand that he's not just concerned about the ordinary American, he's concerned about the political ramifications that will arise as Republicans abandon ordinary Americans in this ridiculous fight to fund the government.
So there's two ways that a government shutdown stops. Either some sort of emergency that really affects people so much that they get furious, like the last government shutdown that lasted so long got resolved when air traffic controllers stopped showing up to work because they weren't getting paid. And then everybody panicked because nobody could fly. And that's how it got resolved. In this case, maybe it's the same thing. Maybe as he alluded to, it's the TSA workers and the lines are so long at airports that people get furious. It could be that a hurricane hits and you can't get relief funding there quickly. But what is more likely is because it takes a ton of real people rage for politicians to have it register. It barely registers normally. But if the stock market crashes, they'll open that government up as quickly as possible. And so good news on that front, not if you hold stocks and generally, but yesterday the market went down more than it has in a long time. So we'll see if it continues to go down, if that panic starts a little bit. Because that normally government shutdowns don't bring down the markets that much, certainly not anywhere as much as not raising the debt ceiling. That's why the debt ceiling, there's a lot of huffing and puffing, but that never actually gets challenged, right? It's always a bluff. In this case, it's not a bluff, but it can eventually hurt the markets bad enough that these politicians then hear from their bosses, which is their donors, and then they'll open it back up. But in the meanwhile, they're negotiating to try to take things away from you and to give it back to their donors.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us, become a Young Turk.